Hello and welcome to section 7 of the Vintage Florals blanket. We're on to a section of squares again, this time with a slightly different centre and joined with the continuous join as you go. Again, we're going back to the idea of a square with a sort of floral shape in the middle. This is again a simple granny square, just treating the centre to make it look a little bit like a flower. And I'm using 3 colours in each square, and there are 13 different colourways. You'll be making 4 of each of those 13, which means that you will have a total of 52 squares for this round. And yep, it's just a case of making them all up and tidying them up, finishing the ends off and having them ready to attach with the join as you go stitch afterwards. I have got lots of neat piles sitting on the desk in front of me, and they will be put onto my knitting needle to make my yarn kebab, and then it's easy just to pull them off one at a time when I'm joining them to the blanket. So I'm going to put these away just now. This is the colour I've chosen to do this sample square in because there is a good contrast between the different shades. So what we're using is Sherbet, Storm Blue and Stylecraft Cream, or at least you will be using Stylecraft Cream. I have just run out of cream and I'm waiting for a delivery. So what I've done is I've just picked up cream in the Stylecraft Batik just to use for this sample piece. I don't need this in the blanket. This is just a sample, so it's not going to, although it will be very slightly different, I won't be using it in the blanket, so it's not a problem. Okay, so we start with a slip knot onto the hook as usual and chain 4, 2, 3, 4 as usual, because what we're going to do is to put our hook into the very first chain, and I'll just make sure that this is picking up all the, yep, into the first chain and make a slip stitch to join the length of the chain together, and you've got a circle with a hole in the middle, and that's where we're going to be putting all the stitches. Now the first thing we're going to do is to chain 1, 2, and that is the equivalent of the first treble stitch. We're going to be making 8 spokes in this centre round, and this is the first spoke. Now there's going to be a chain stitch between each spoke, so I have to do another chain stitch to make the chain after the spoke. So that's 3 chains, then yarn over and make a treble stitch into that center hole, 1, 2, and chain. We've now got 2 spokes and we want to have 8, so we've got 6 more to do, so that's 1 more treble with a chain and another one. I'll just go relatively quickly around this with a chain, and so it's 1 treble and a chain stitch, and we're using UK terms of course. So that's yarn over into the center, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 and pull through 2 and chain. I'm just going to stop at this point and check how many I've got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I've got 1 more to do, and finish with your last chain, and then find the top of your first chain 2 and pull through a slip stitch to finish off. So that is round 1 of this square. cut that yarn because we're finished with it. Pull it through, and it looks a bit strange at the moment with this large hole, of course, in the middle, but when you come to sew in this end and pull it tightly, it closes it up nicely. So that is round 1. For round 2, we're going to pick up this darker blue, the storm blue, and we're going to make a round of bobble stitches. Now, what you don't want to do at this point is turn over. We're just going to keep it front side up, and I don't usually start in the bit where you've finished. I find somewhere else in the circle I find a space to start. So this is the chain space between the spokes of the center. So I'm going to put my hook in and attach my yarn. And I'm going to chain 2. This is the equivalent of the first treble stitch. Now what we're going to do in each of these chain spaces is a bobble stitch. So I'm going to yarn over, put my hook in, pull up a loop. You've got 3 loops sitting on your hook. Yarn over and pull through just the first 2 so that there are 2 loops left on the hook. Then I'm going to yarn over again, put my hook in, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through just the first 2 loops, which means you've got 3 loops on your hook, and then yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through the first 2. Now for this very first bobble stitch, because we had the chain 2 to start, I'm going to stop at this point. So I've got 4 loops on the hook, and I'm going to yarn over now and pull through all 4 loops, and then I'm going to chain 2, and that's the first bobble stitch. So I'm going to yarn over and go into the next space and yarn over, pull it through, yarn over and pull through the first 2, which leaves 2 loops on the hook, and we're going to do that again. Pull through the first 2, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, in, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, and that's 4 loops. And because we didn't have a chain 2 to start here, we're going to do another one. So that is exactly the same. Pull through the first 2 loops, and you'll have 5 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through all 5. And then chain 2. And as usual, the bobble is sitting better on the other side. It's flatter on the front. So we'll bear that in mind for doing the next round. So I'm going to continue with this bobble stitch. And I'll work all the way around until I've done 8 of these bobble stitches. And then I'll be back to show you the next round. So that's me just finished my 3rd bobble, chain 2, and I'll show you what it's like when we've got to the end of this round. And that is round 2 of this square done. 8 bobble stitches all the way round, and this was the front side. As you can see, when I turn it over, there's a bit more texture on the other side, but we're not going to turn over yet, so we're going to keep it on this side, and we're about to start round 3 with the sherbet. Again, I prefer to start somewhere away from where I finished, so I'm just going to go in here, and what we're going to do with this round is to square off the circle. So I've attached my yarn in one of the chain 2 spaces, and I'm going to chain 2, which is the first treble equivalent, and then I'm going to put 2 more chain stitches, treble stitches into that same space. that is half of a corner. We'll finish that corner off when we come all the way round. Now, at this point, I'm not chaining anything between the clusters. I'm just going to yarn over and go into the next space and put in 3 treble stitches. 1, 2, 3. And then into the next space, and this will be a corner, so we're going to put in 3 trebles, chain 2 for the absolute corner, and 3 trebles, all in the same space. I'll just show you that in a minute. I'm just going to get my yarn loosened. And there you can see the corner taking shape. And there is one group of 3 trebles between each corner. So I'm on to the next corner. Chain 2, 3 more in that corner. And I'll show you that, and then I'll move on and finish this round. So you can see we've got the 2 corners there and one group of 3 trebles between each of these corners. I'll work on and I'll come back when I get to this point. I've just about come all the way around and back to where I started, but I wanted to let you see this cluster because this was the very first bobble stitch that we made in the previous round, and if you'll remember, there was the chain 2 to start with and then the bobble stitch right next to it. So be careful that you don't pierce that bit by mistake. Your space is between the first chain 2 and the last bobble. So then we've put in the 3 trebles. We're going to finish this corner off because we started with half of a corner. 1, 2, 3, and chain 2. And then all we need to do is slip stitch into the top of the first. I don't like picking up just one loop. Make sure you can get in and pick up 2. That just makes it all firmer. And that is the end of the 3rd round. Now we're not changing colour because we have 2 more rounds to do in this colour. So this time I'm going to chain 2. And I'm going to, this time, turn it round. This will be the first time that I've turned it. And like you might remember from a previous square, when you turn it, that first chain 2 comes at the extreme right side of the corner. So I'm going to make a complete corner in this space, rather than in the previous round we started with half a corner. So the chain 2 is the first treble stitch, and then I'm going to put in 2 more, and chain 2 and 3 trebles, and this is a complete corner for this first corner. You can see that's the first complete corner. And then this time there will be 2 spaces between each corner, so there'll be 3 trebles in each of these 2 spaces. So there we have another one here. And then we're ready to do the next corner. So this is quite straightforward. So what I'm going to do is come all the way round, and I'll come back when I'm at this point. And I've worked all the way round, and I'm back to the first corner, which was a complete one. So we don't need to put any more stitches into that corner. All you need to do is find the top of your first chain 2 and make a slip stitch to finish off. And chain 2 again, and we're on to the last round of the square. Turn it over, and this time you'll see that the closest space to that chain 2 is not a corner, it's this one. It's the first one to the left of the corner, so we're going to start in there. This will be the equivalent of the first treble stitch, so we put 2 treble stitches into that space. And this time there will be 3, including this one, 1, 2, 3 spaces to work along before we get to the next corner. So I'll work around on this, and I'll show you what happens when we get to the final corner of the square. Now, as you can see, I've come all the way round with my final round of the square, and because we started in this space rather than the corner, we had a full corner to make for the last one, the 4th corner, and so we just, as usual, look for the top of the first chain 2 and pull the yarn through and fasten off. And that is the square. Now, like I said before, this part, the dark part, looks good, looks better on its wrong side because you see more of it. So what we're going to do now is turn over, and that will mean that when you're coming to join these squares with the joining stitch, you'll be on the right side of the blanket as usual, checking the stitch marker in the middle to make sure. You'll be on the right side of the blanket, but the wrong side of the last round of the squares will be what you join to the blanket. And with that in mind, you have these ends to get rid of before you start to do the join, and please do that. It's much easier to finish off the ends on a square like this than when you've got a whole blanket. And there will be other ends to finish off on the blanket, so you just don't want to end up with hundreds. So with this in the mind, that the fact that this wrong side of the last round is the uppermost side, you want to just grab your ends that are showing on the front like this and pull them through to the other side for sewing in. Pull them all through like that, and that's nice and neat. And then you can sew these in like we've done before, with the middle one being pulled tightest to close up that hole in the middle, and the other ones being woven in through the back maybe once, twice, 3 times to make sure that they don't loosen. Now I'm going to do that with this square, and then I'll come back when I've got all my squares in order onto my knitting needle, ready to do the join as you go. There will be a small gap, you won't be aware of it, but it's annoying to me that I'll have to wait until my cream yarn comes in. Hopefully the delivery won't be long, and then I'll be doing the border for, or sorry, not the border, the join for these squares. So I'll be back at that point. Here are my completed squares, and I've got them all laid out in the order that I want to put them onto this knitting needle. So this is going to be my yarn kebab, ready for when I come to do the joining. I'm starting with this one here, which is the duck egg blue, and I've laid them out in a way that I think balances the colours pretty well, and I've made sure that because we're doing a big square, that the final colour is not going to be too close to the starting colour. So I'm just going to add these onto the hook, the knitting needle just now. You, of course, can really do them in whichever order you want. Just try to balance out the colours so that you don't have two pinks together or two lilacs or whatever. And I've turned all my squares, I'm proud to say, are neatly finished off, apart from, like I've said to you before, I always leave the outside end until I've joined it, which means that there are always going to be ends to sew in on the blanket itself, but all the other ends are securely finished off and the squares are looking nice and neat, and I've got them all turned so that the final round is the wrong side uppermost, because that's the way we're going to be joining them. So all I need to do now is spear my squares onto my knitting needle. You don't need to do it this way, by the way. You could lay them out in a box or on a tray or something. This is just whatever way you find is easiest, but I always like putting them onto the knitting needle because I can move around with them. And so I'll put the first group on and let you see the layout of the colours. So there are my first 13 squares onto the needle, and I think that balances the colour out reasonably well, so I'm quite happy with that. So I'll continue on now and put all the others on. I'll go back to the duck egg now and continue in the same sequence of colours, and that will be me ready for the day that comes when my cream yarn arrives, and I'll be able to do the join. And my fingers are tightly crossed because, as those of you who are in the UK will know, at this particular point, this is January 2023, we have mail strikes and post is held up and things aren't just working the way they should. But hopefully we'll have cream yarn very soon and I'll be back to do the join. Bye for now. And just like that, I'm back. I haven't actually got my cream delivery yet, but I know it's on its way. However, I have found a little bit of cream yarn, which I'm going to use for the tutorial. It's not obviously going to take me all the way around the sides of the blanket, but at least it will let us get started on the tutorial. Here, before we start, is the full yarn kebab. All the squares are in their correct order and I'm ready just to pull from the top each time I'm joining the next square. So I'm going to put that to one side just now. And I've actually taken the first square off. Now, the way I had put them onto the knitting needle was the right way up to be actually attaching them. So the right way up is the last round of the square is on the wrong side. The reason I want to do it that way, of course, is there's more benefit for the bobble stitch. It's more raised when it's on this side. So we're attaching to the right side of the blanket and it's the last round turned over for the square. And we're using the cream, which is again this small amount which I've managed to find in amongst my stash. And what I've done is I've worked up one side of the square to start. Now you've done this just before in section 5, am I right? The last round of squares where you joined with the variegated yarn. So really we're just repeating what you've done already. but it's probably good just to talk you through it briefly as well. So we've done up one side, and remember the stitch you're using for the join is half treble stitch, it's not a full treble stitch, and the reason is because I think it keeps everything neater and more precise. So I started in the corner and chained 2 and put in 2 half trebles, and then put 3 half trebles in every space up the side, 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces, and then started the corner with 3 half trebles. And now I'm going to find my corner space in the blanket and pull through a slip stitch, and then 3 half trebles into the corner of the square. This will all come back to you, I'm sure. 3 half trebles, and that square is that corner is complete, and then we can work along the top. So having finished the corner, I'm just going to go into the next space along in the blanket and make a slip stitch, and then 3 half trebles. And into the blanket again. And there you can see it being attached to the blanket. I will work along here and down to this point, because at this point, remember, you stop and we bring in the second square ready to join it, and you don't complete the bottom edge until all the squares are joined on 3 sides, and then we finish off by coming the full way round the blanket, doing the final bottom edge of the squares. So I'll come back when I've got to this point and I'm ready to start the next square. So I've come round 3 sides of this square, and I've done the first 3 half trebles in the bottom corner, and now I just need to do 3 half trebles in the equivalent bottom corner of the second square. Before I do that though, I thought it might be an idea to weigh this, because I thought, well, you know, if I work, I'll see how far this will take me going round. It's obviously not going to go round all 4 sides, but I'll see how far it takes me with this amount of yarn. It's probably quite a good idea to have a note of how much that is, so that if you are starting off with a smaller amount, you'll know how far you'll get with it. So this is actually 30 grams of the cream Stylecraft special cream yarn, and we'll just see how far we get with the 30 grams. So I have done my first 3 half trebles, and I'm going into the corner of the second square and putting in 3 half trebles, and then if I bend that round, you can see that it corresponds with the 3 half trebles in the first square, and then move up to the next space and make a slip stitch, and then back to the second square with 3 half trebles, and we continue up the side doing that. Slip stitch, and then 3 half trebles. I'll just go up as far as the top of this side, and then I'll continue on. I'll pop back when I've actually come to the end of my 30 grams of cream, just to let you see how far round I got with that. And then I'll also pop back when I have the rest of my cream yarn and finished off the 3 sides of each square, and then I'll show you how we do remind you anyway how we do the bottom bit. Now we're up to this corner, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip stitch into the corner of the first square and also into the corner, into the space in the blanket, so that it's nice and secure. So 1 and 2, and then we'll continue along the top. So I'll keep going now, and I'll see you at a couple of points along the road. Bye for now. Hello again. Right, I have done a little bit more than I said I was going to do, because just half an hour after I finished my last video chat with you, my yarn delivery arrived with the new balls of cream yarn. So instead of stopping after my 30 grams were used up, I attached the new ball and continued all the way round. So this is the point where we are. My 30-gram ball of the cream lasted as far as I managed to attach 24 squares, so that's not quite 2 sides done. And this is my new ball, and I've got to the end of doing all 3 sides of the squares. So I used 34 grams out of my new ball. So you can say that to do the 3 sides of all the squares, joining them to the blanket, took 64 grams altogether. I think this, which is left, which is 66 grams in this ball, that should get me round the outside edge. We'll see what happens. So this was the very first square that I attached way back at the beginning, and this is the very last square that I attached. And so I've worked up the side or along the side, attaching it to the pale pink, and I've now got to the top. And this is where we start to make the outside edge of the squares in one piece all the way round. So if you look back to the very first pink square, we had done half of the corner, and that will be completed once we've gone all the way around the blanket and come back along here. But we've only so far done half of this corner. So what I'm going to do now is just attach the 2 corners with a slip stitch. There we go. I'm actually working upside down, which is not easy. So what I'll do is I'll just bring that. That's so I'm going to attach with the slip stitch. So I need to pull my yarn through, and that's me attached the 2 corners. I've got the other half of this corner to finish. So I'm going to make my 3 half trebles. Like that. And then this is the direction we're working. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work around this corner. 3 half trebles, 2 chains, 3 half trebles in the corner. So I'm going to work round, and I'm going to come to this point where I'll stop, come back and show you how we get over this little bit again. I'm sure you'll remember, but just in case, just as a reminder, I'll do that. Then I'll work all the way round and just let you see what it looks like before we move on to the next section. So I've worked round, and I am just approaching this join. Now, as you can see, in every part where the squares are joined on this bottom edge, you will have only got 3 half trebles in each of these corners, so they need to be finished off with 3 half trebles. So I'm going to do that. 3 half trebles, 1, 2, 3. And then I need to put 3 half trebles in this corner, but there is a bit of a jump from this corner to this corner, so we need to kind of make our yarn travel neatly from one corner to the other. And what we do with that is to chain 1 and then separate the 2 joins a little and put your hook in and make a slip stitch. All that is doing, it's not doing anything, it's not adding any stitches. All it's doing is making sure that your yarn is moving over to this corner. Chain 1 again, and then we can put in 3 half trebles in the second corner. And there you can see how that is nice and flat and neatly made. So we've completed the corners in both of these squares. You'll need to remember to do that in every join as you go round, and that's all there is to it. And there we are. The lovely winter sunlight is fading now. It's taken me about an hour, I think, and possibly less, but I've gone all the way around the outside edge and I'm back to where I started. And all we need to do is finish off that very first corner. 1, 2, 3. And we need to slip stitch it. And that's us. I can cut the yarn and fasten off. So that is the end of section 7 of the blanket. I weighed my what was left of this ball of yarn, and I think if my sums are correct, let me just have a look. We used 64.24. We used in total 86 grams of the cream. So if you were starting with a brand new ball of cream, for example, you know that you would have just enough to do all 4 sides of these squares. And I'm going to leave you now with a kind of overview of what the blanket looks like so far. And then I'll be back with the next video for section 8, which is the final border. It's getting a bit large now to get it all into camera at once, but this is the border that you've just finished, section 7, and this is how it looks with the rest of the blanket. I really like the section 7 border because I think it gives a nice simple edging to the slightly more complicated centre. And as I said, that's it for section 7. I'll be back with section 8 very shortly, and I'll see you then. Bye for now.